Hi there, I'm Mark and welcome to the channel. Hey, if you are new here and this is your first time, your first visit, please let us know you've visited. Leave a comment or subscribe, it does help the channel. And likewise, if you are already a subscriber or have visited before, hello again and thank you for your continued support. It really does make a difference. I'm doing a very slow read of Lord of the Rings. No idea how many times I've read it now, far too many. But I said this time I'm going to look at it slightly different. I'm going to really consider, is Sam the real hero? Does he come across as being the one who is driving things, not necessarily outside of the Fellowship or even fully inside the Fellowship, but we tend to look at Frodo as being the ring bearer and therefore the one that is heroic, and Sam is the trusty sidekick, the gardener. But how accurate is that? In this episode, I'm going to start at the sign of the prancing pony and go up to the end of A Knife in the Dark. And we are introduced to the character Aragorn here at this particular point in the story that for some reason, despite knowing it very well, I've missed or had forgotten. And I don't know whether it's because in my mind now I've got more of the movies fixed or whatever. But for instance, before we really get to know Strider, Frodo is given a letter by Butterbor, who is the innkeeper at the Prancing Pony. And in it, there's just this thing that talks about Strider. He said, "Make sure that it is the real Strider. There are many strange men on the roads. His true name is Aragorn." And then there's this wonderful ditty. "All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes of fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king." That's a foreshadowing. Definitely a foreshadowing of what's about to, well, I say about to, over the long course of these 3 books. In this case, the 1-book version will happen. It's all to do with Aragorn finding his true role and then coming to accept it. Strider is a very interesting character. I remember when I first ever read the book in the 1970s, I was a school child, about 11. So this would have been around about 1975. I didn't really get Strider. He was this almost like remote character that came to help them. In my mind, I didn't really picture him at all. It was only through the movies that I kind of got some kind of idea what he would have looked like. And what kind of a personality he comes across on the book. So as a close reading, for instance, he talks to the hobbits in the inn once he's met them. He said, "I did not intend to tell you all about myself at once. I had to study you first and make sure of you. The enemy has set traps for me before now." So he's very guarded, he's very wary of people, and even the hobbits, who were much smaller than himself. He introduces himself quite bluntly. He says, "I am Aragorn," and he stands up and he drew out his sword, but instead it was broken a foot below the hilt. So it's almost like you just see the top. What a strange thing to carry around. But there you go. He does have a surety about himself. Obviously, he's older than he looks, and he's got a pedigree, and he is used to looking after himself out in the wilds. That is revealed over time. As they leave Bree to go off towards Rivendell, there's an event where he laughs and he said, "My cuts, short or long, don't go wrong." Okay, he's a poet and didn't know it, but there's a real surety there with Aragorn that we come to know over time. But at this point, you might be thinking, as I was, I'm not sure about this Aragorn. What is he? Who is he? He does, of course, command a lot of history. he knows about the things that they come across in what increasingly becomes an empty land full of ruins. They get to Weathertop and he said, well, Merry asks, I wonder who made this path and what for? And Strider says, in the first days of the North Kingdom, they built a great watchtower on Weathertop. Amon Sul, they called it. Nothing remains of it now but a tumbled ring, like a rough crown on the old hill's head. Yet once it was tall and fair. So he knows about this empty land, and it makes you wonder what he would have thought about that he has quite a long history, and he would have seen this land increasingly fall into ruin. But towards the end of The Knife in the Dark, they're on Weathertop, and before the Black Riders appear, this is Strider, gives a lay. It's what he would call the Anthenath version of songs in Elvish, which doesn't render very well into Common Tongue. And it's about Beren and Tinuviel, who Beren is like a man who meets Tinuviel, elf, they fall in love. Tinuviel is not the real name, it's Luthien. And she chose mortality and to die from the world so that she might follow him, Beren. Well, again, that's Arwen and Aragorn. And they're of pretty much the same line. And it's like history repeats then throughout this story at different points in the various ages of Middle-earth. And that's really all you get about Aragorn. Who is he at this stage? They don't really trust him, especially Sam. And therefore I'd like to talk a bit more about Sam, because that was the original intention of asking how much does he have agency in this story, and does he have control from the sidelines? When they meet Aragorn, the hobbits, it's Sam, and it's written here, page 172 of this version. Sam was not daunted, and he still eyed Strider dubiously, which is why Aragorn stands up and pulls out his sword. And when they leave Bree, they're all going off, and it is said that to the Breelanders, Strider was held in awe. But there's, as we find out, a lot of people in this small village. There's some men and there's some hobbits that, as they're going out, they're being watched. So that at the further gate, a dark, ill-kept house behind a thick hedge was nearby, and a sallow face with a sly, slanting eyes, but it vanished at once, so they were being watched. Another man stared boldly, heavy black brows and dark, scornful eyes, and he says, "Morning, Longshanks," which is used in the movie, but Sam is saying that, isn't it? He said, "Off early," and then he looks at the hobbits, and he says to them, "I suppose you know who you've taken up with. That stick-at-naught Strider, that is." So slurs. But it's Sam who responds, no one else. Again, it's Sam. Quick as lightning, an apple left his hand and hit this Bill square on the nose. Sam. It's also Sam who appears, as far as Tolkien wants to put across, as being the most observant. As they're approaching Amon Sul, Sam came upon a small store of firewood neatly stacked. "I wonder if old Gandalf has been here," he said to Pippin. "Whoever it was put this stuff here meant to come back, it seems." Strider was greatly interested in these discoveries. He said, "I wish I had waited and explored the ground down here myself." So it's not even the ranger who finds it, it's Sam. Sam viewed the hollow with great dislike. "Hadn't we better clear out quick, Mr. Strider?" he asked. "Yes, we certainly must." Again, no Frodo here. It's Sam. He is the one that is actionable. He will do actions. Throwing stuff at people or going around looking where the others seem to be oblivious. There's a couple of things I think I'm beginning to notice for the first time. We're in Bree. It then gets to what's called a Knife in the Dark. But it opens not in Bree. It's actually at Crick Hollow, where they left Fatty Bolger. And Fatty Bolger is not in the movie, but he comes across as being, again, another hobbit who is prepared to act. As they prepared for sleep in the inn at Bree, darkness lay on Buckland. So this is back where they've just come from. A mist strayed in the dells and along the riverbank. The house at Cricollo stood silent. Fatty Bolger, and I'm going to miss out pieces here now. There was a brooding threat in the breathless night air. A black shadow moved under the trees. 3 black figures entered like shades of night creeping along the ground. Fatty Bolger, though, had not been idle, and he suddenly rushes out, shouting, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" The brandy bucks were blowing the horn call of Buckland that had not been sounded for 100 years, not since the white wolves came in the fell winter, when the brandy wine was frozen over. The black figures fled from the house. While that was happening, leagues away, miles away, way out of hearing and sight, Frodo in Bree knows what's happening. He senses over long distance. He has a vision of what's happened. In the early night, Frodo woke from deep sleep, suddenly as if some sound or presence had disturbed him. He saw that Strider was sitting alert in the chair, and so on. Frodo soon went to sleep again, but his dreams were again troubled with the noise of wind and of galloping hoofs. Far off he heard a horn blowing wildly. That's psychic. I never realised that was implied with Frodo. He senses stuff over great distance. Again, I don't think that comes across in the movies. I'd forgotten it was in the book. But very, very interesting. But Frodo, of all the hobbits, he seems to be the one that can very quickly become downhearted, strangely, at this stage. So when the ponies next day in Bree are found to have vanished, Frodo was crushed by the news. How could they hope to reach Rivendell on foot, pursued by mounted enemies? So he has this burden, of course, but thankfully there are people around him to support him, specifically Sam. Frodo comes across as being very sensitive, interesting characterization. Reading the story so far, in the little bit that I have read, I'm amazed with how Tolkien goes from light to dark, light to dark. He's very good at that. And I said on the previous episode about, is Sam the real hero, that when they're at the Barrow Wights, just after meeting Tom Bombadil, I didn't get a sense of dread. There's no real tenseness there. But in Knife in the Dark, when they're at Weathertop, it's well done. You do get a sense of tenseness as they know that the Black Riders are creeping towards them. And there's this great scene where they're in the hollow under Hamon Sul, the top bit that looks like a crown. And they're looking out, and the moon came up, and it said, on the top of the hill, something small and dark against the glimmer of the moonlight. You could just imagine the moon coming up and a dark shadow in front of it. Very well done. But again, Sam. Sam comes running back from the edge of the dell. I don't know what it is, he said, but I suddenly felt afraid. I dursn't go outside this dell for any money. I felt that something was creeping up the slope. And he gets quite tense. And when Frodo, he's now vulnerable. He's carrying the ring, and just like in the movies, he's about to put the ring onto his finger, and then it reveals what they really are. You can see through the wrappings of the black cloaks to see that they're like men in white robes. One's got a crown and a sword. But just before he does that, he says he felt Sam looking at him. Again, he senses something. And Sam, ever observant. Sam looking at him as if he knew, this is Sam, that he, Frodo, his master, was in some great trouble. And then, of course, we have the bit where Frodo gets stabbed. There's also another thing here that I don't remember ever thinking about or wondering what it was. And it's the black breath. I'm sure it's not in the movies, unless they did a deleted scene. So, when they're at Bree, the Black Riders come in. And then they find someone almost unconscious out in the streets. And they say it's the black breath, and I'm trying to find it while I'm talking. And failing miserably. Yeah, here it is. It's on page 175. The Black Breath. The riders must have left their horses outside and passed back through the south gate in secret. They will know all the news now. It's a way in which they can force people to do something. And yeah, it's a weapon. It's like the ring wraith's breath. It's poisonous and can overpower those affected by it. An evil blight in which people can go into a cold sleep and never recover. I can't remember that in the movies. I don't even remember reading it last time. I must be useless at reading. I've missed so much. So these guys, the ring wraiths, I'm going to have to do a subject just on them alone because they're almost OP. They're overpowered in some way, certainly at night. They don't have sight, as we find out in the chapter coming up to Ammon's Soul, Weathertop, but they're very dangerous at night. And at daytime, they can use spies to look for them. But they've got the Black Breath, they're on horses, eventually they'll be on the worms flying around. It's just, wow, okay. Which adds a sense of dread. Black Breath, and I cannot remember if we will come across it again later in the story. I'm just as, or more convinced now, that the engine of this, as far as the hobbits are concerned, with the absence of Gandalf especially, is Sam. He seems to be the one like a guard dog who will effectively snarl, do something, will sense something, has the agency of doing stuff. Frodo seems to be often in his own little bubble, very sensitive and definitely psychic. I've never... Is that even a thing? Do people talk about this? I've never come across it before. Strider, doubtful, weary himself, and very fierce looking. His look is very fierce. And in fact, I'm going to try and represent that for the thumbnail. You know, you'll see his face as Aragorn. It's a great coming together of a man that when I first read the book, I thought, can we trust Aragorn? Of course, you know this. Well, I know the tale now, so yes. But if you didn't, you'd think, oh, who is this guy? Where's he leading them off to? And isn't it strange that he's supposed to be really good, according to Gandalf, but then leads them into danger and doesn't even realise they're coming towards him? It's Sam. Very amazing things. Again, what did I do with the book? Did I rush through it and miss half of this stuff? I'm sure I did. Might be age. Might be forgetting stuff. I think it's also worth noting that on YouTube there is a massive presence of Lord of the Rings. A lot of booktubers will talk about the book. There's a lot of people who are absolutely fans of the lore, the Silmarillion, the Professor, as they call Tolkien. I've often wondered what Tolkien would think of it all. And again, with this book, very aware of the fact that Tolkien himself said, don't read too much into it. It's just a story. It's just a story, adventure story. But there you go. Enjoying the read. I'll continue again and report back whenever. Probably talk about Rivendell. Ta-ta for now.